It was just an ordinary Tuesday. The sun had barely begun to peek over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the sleepy town. In the quiet halls of a local high school, the students shuffled to class, all buzzing with the usual chatter about homework and weekend plans. But little did anyone know, today would change everything. Today, one simple decision by a teenager would unravel a mystery no one could have ever predicted. You're about to hear a story that will not only challenge everything you think you know about blood, but also make you question the boundaries of human biology. Stay with me, because you're about to uncover something truly unbelievable. This isn't just a heartwarming story about a teenager donating blood for a school drive. This is a mystery that will leave you scratching your head, asking questions no one can answer. Meet Ethan. At 17, he was like any other high school student, energetic, friendly, and always ready to lend a hand. The blood drive at his school was a routine event, one that most students viewed as just another opportunity to help out, maybe get some extra credit and feel good about themselves. Ethan wasn't any different. He had always been the kind of person who liked to help others, especially when it came to causes like this. His friends jokingly called him the goody two-shoes, but Ethan didn't mind. To him, it was just part of who he was. A teenager with big dreams and a huge heart. He walked into the school gymnasium that day, all set to donate his blood and maybe get a snack afterward. Little did he know, this was the day his life, and the lives of several others, would be turned upside down. The blood donation process was nothing new to Ethan. He sat in the chair, arm outstretched, ready for the nurse to start the procedure. The needle pierced his skin, and he winced a little, just like everyone else does. As the bag filled with his blood, Ethan couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride. After all, what could be more selfless than giving a piece of yourself to save someone else? He watched as the red liquid slowly dripped into the bag, but something wasn't right. The nurse, who had seen hundreds of donations in her career, suddenly paused. She stared at the bag for a moment, then looked up at Ethan, her face contorting into a puzzled expression. At first, he thought it was nothing. But the longer she looked, the more unsettled she seemed. "Is everything all right?" Ethan asked, trying to hide the nervousness creeping into his voice. The nurse, clearly trying to mask her growing concern, gave him a forced smile. Yeah, everything's fine. Just give me a moment." But the moment stretched into what felt like an eternity. The nurse called over a lab technician who worked behind the scenes, someone who had years of experience processing blood samples. Ethan felt his heart race a little. What was going on? He was beginning to feel like he had somehow become part of something bigger than just a simple donation. And that's when it happened. The technician glanced at the blood bag, then back at the nurse. His eyebrows furrowed as he stared at the label on the bag. Then he quickly walked over to Ethan and asked him a question that would make anyone's skin crawl. "Are you sure you're Ethan Parks?" the technician asked, his voice steady, but filled with an undercurrent of disbelief. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, that's me. What's going on?" The technician's expression didn't change, but his gaze lingered on Ethan for a moment longer than was comfortable. "We just need to check a few things. Please stay here." For a brief second, Ethan wondered if he had done something wrong. Was there something about his blood type that was out of the ordinary? Had he missed a step in the process? Maybe he wasn't as healthy as he thought. But the truth was much stranger and far more terrifying than that. Ethan's blood wasn't just different, it was impossible. You're probably wondering by now, what could be so strange about a teenager's blood? Well, hold on to your seat, because this is where the mystery begins to unfold. It turns out that what the lab tech noticed that day was something no one could explain. Ethan's blood wasn't just a match for every blood type known to science. It wasn't just a rare and unique trait. What they found in that blood, what they discovered after hours of testing, would change the way we understand genetics, biology, and even the very essence of life itself. Imagine being told your blood defied everything science thought was possible. Imagine learning that something as basic as a blood donation could unravel a scientific riddle that has stumped researchers for decades. Ethan, a normal teenager just trying to do his part, had unknowingly become the subject of a medical mystery that no one could have anticipated. And trust me, You'll want to stick around because the answers they uncovered are even more shocking than you can imagine. So, what exactly is going on? How could this seemingly ordinary teenager have blood that couldn't exist? What happens next will leave you questioning reality itself, and the implications for the world of science, medicine, and even genetics are massive. But the real question is, what does Ethan do with this newfound knowledge? And how does it change everything he thought he knew about himself? You're not going to want to miss what happens next. Keep watching, because in just a few moments, you'll uncover the impossible truth and the shocking twist that no one saw coming. As Ethan sat there, his mind raced through everything he could have possibly done to end up in this situation. He had always been the average kid, the kind of person who blended into the crowd without drawing too much attention. His teachers liked him well enough, and his friends, though small in number, were loyal and supportive. But in the weeks leading up to the blood drive, Ethan had been under more stress than usual. Schoolwork had piled up as finals approached, and he had been dealing with some complicated personal issues at home. His parents had been distant lately, not in a dramatic way, but enough to make Ethan feel like something was off. They hadn't been fighting, but there was a strange tension in the air. It was the kind of subtle change that you couldn't quite put your finger on, but you felt it all the same. To make matters worse, his best friend, Liam, had been acting strangely. They'd known each other since middle school, but in the past few months, Liam had started distancing himself. Ethan had tried to talk to him about it, but every conversation felt like an uphill battle. It was as though Liam was hiding something, and it wasn't just the usual teenage drama. There was a layer of secrecy in Liam's behavior that Ethan couldn't ignore. But he hadn't thought much of it, brushing it off as typical teenage angst and focusing on his own challenges. After all, it wasn't unusual for people to go through phases where they just weren't themselves. But the oddest thing had been happening with Ethan's health lately. In the past few weeks, he'd felt a strange energy boost, almost as if he could do more with less effort. He would wake up in the morning feeling fully rested, even after just a few hours of sleep, and his body seemed to recover faster from physical activities than it ever had before. At first, he thought it was just a coincidence, maybe a result of finally getting his sleep schedule under control, or the adrenaline rush of all the school projects coming to an end. But now, sitting in the lab, staring at the technician's uneasy face, those strange bursts of energy suddenly felt more like a clue than a random anomaly. The nurse and the lab tech had disappeared into the back office, leaving Ethan alone in the room with nothing but his thoughts and the faint sound of murmured voices behind the closed door. Ethan could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each beat louder than the last. He tried to rationalize what was happening. Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe the tech had seen something strange and jumped to conclusions. It wasn't like anyone had ever seen his blood type before, but that didn't mean it was impossible. There had to be an explanation, there always was. But the longer the wait dragged on, the more uneasy Ethan became. Something was wrong. Really wrong. Then, as if on cue, the nurse came back, her face pale. The technician followed closely behind, his face unreadable but serious. Ethan swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how silent the room had become. "Ethan," the nurse started, her voice softer than before, "there's something we need to talk about." Before he could ask any questions, the technician spoke up, cutting her off. "We've never seen anything like this before," he said, his words hanging in the air like a threat. Ethan's blood was unusual, yes, but that wasn't what made it so disturbing. The real issue was that there was a biological impossibility at play. The technician couldn't explain it at first. Hell, no one could, but it was clear that Ethan's blood contained markers that were completely unheard of. His genetic profile seemed to defy basic biological principles. Ethan's blood, quite literally, didn't match the human norm. At that moment, Ethan's mind raced. How could this be? He had no special medical history, no family members with rare conditions. His parents were both healthy, his medical records had been clean. But here he was, trapped in a whirlwind of confusion, trying to make sense of the impossible. The technician asked him questions, probing gently but with urgency. "Have you had any recent medical treatments? Any unusual illnesses or surgeries?" "No," Ethan replied, his voice shaky. "I've been fine. Just the usual stuff, you know? The technician seemed unconvinced, staring intently at him as if searching for something in his face, as though Ethan held the key to understanding a puzzle no one had solved. Have you traveled recently? Any trips abroad? Anything out of the ordinary? The nurse's voice was almost too calm, like she was trying to guide him toward some missing piece of the puzzle. But Ethan's gut told him there was something else at play here. This wasn't just about medical anomalies or random coincidences. Something deeper was happening, something connected to his past that he hadn't yet uncovered. And just as the questions kept coming, a strange thought crossed Ethan's mind. Liam. Could Liam have been involved in all of this? He had been acting strange, but it didn't make sense. Or did it? Liam had always been the type to get mixed up in weird situations. He had a way of attracting attention without ever meaning to. Was it possible that Ethan's recent health changes were connected to something Liam had been involved in? Had he known something about Ethan's past that he hadn't shared? But before Ethan could dive deeper into these thoughts, the technician dropped a bombshell. We're going to need to run more tests. A lot more tests, he said, his voice now tense, almost like a warning. I don't think you fully understand what's at stake here. What we're dealing with it's something that shouldn't be possible. That's when it hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about a routine blood donation. This was about a mystery that reached back further than he could have imagined, a secret buried somewhere in his past that had just come back to the surface in the most unimaginable way. Whatever was going on, whatever anomaly was in his blood, was something that not only involved him, but likely involved those closest to him. And the strangest part? He had a sinking feeling that he had only scratched the surface. The truth, if it was even possible to know it, was far more complicated, far darker than he could ever have imagined. The tension in the lab was palpable as the technician and nurse exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from professional concern to something more cryptic. Ethan sat frozen in his chair, barely able to process what they were telling him. He tried to focus on their words, but they didn't seem to make sense anymore. The world around him felt like it was spinning faster than he could keep up. His mind kept coming back to one question. Why me? Why had his blood suddenly become the focus of something so intense, so inexplicable? What could be so unique about him, about his past, that had triggered all of this? Just as the technician was about to suggest another round of testing, a voice suddenly interrupted the growing tension. It was a familiar voice, one that Ethan hadn't heard in days. Liam. Ethan, we need to talk. The door to the lab creaked open, and there stood Liam, his face shadowed by a deep sense of urgency. He had never been one to show up unannounced, especially not in situations like this, so Ethan's pulse quickened at the sight of him. There was something in Liam's eyes, something more than the usual cool detachment. Ethan could sense it, a quiet panic, a hint of fear.
But why?
What could possibly make Liam so nervous at a time like this? Without waiting for permission, Liam stepped inside and closed the door behind him, his gaze locking with Ethan's. I didn't want you to get caught up in this, Liam said, his voice low but firm. Caught up in what? Ethan felt the urge to ask, but before he could, the technician held up a hand. Liam, you shouldn't be here, he said, his tone surprisingly harsh for someone who had been so calm just moments ago. This is no longer just about a blood donation. We're talking about something far bigger than you realize. There's a lot at stake here. Liam took a step forward, his eyes flicking to the technician before landing back on Ethan. I know, he said, the words thick with a sense of warning. And that's why I'm here. You need to stop asking questions. Stop looking into this. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, stop asking questions? He demanded, finally finding his voice. This is my blood, my health, my life we're talking about. What's going on, Liam? Liam didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at the technician and the nurse, then lowered his voice, as though trying to keep the words between the two of them. There's stuff you don't know about, he whispered. Things you don't understand. His words hung in the air like a warning, but Ethan couldn't make sense of what was being said. What was Liam trying to tell him? What was he hiding? Before Ethan could press him further, the technician interrupted again, his face tight with tension. This is exactly why I said we need to stop. This is bigger than you both think. People are already asking questions, and if you push too hard—" He paused, the room growing colder. "You might not like what you uncover." That was enough to set off alarm bells in Ethan's mind. He couldn't help it. The feeling of unease, of being watched, it all began to build up like a storm in the pit of his stomach. What was it that they were so afraid of? What could be so dangerous that it was worth warning him to stay away from the truth? The nurse, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke up, her voice almost pleading. "Ethan, listen to us. We're not trying to scare you. We're trying to protect you. There are things happening behind the scenes that you won't understand unless you let us handle it. Please." But Ethan wasn't having it. He had to know more. The feeling of something important slipping through his fingers was unbearable. There were too many questions, too many inconsistencies. Why had Liam warned him to stop asking questions? What was the technician so afraid of? And why, out of all the people, had his blood turned out to be the thing they were all focused on? Suddenly, the lights in the lab flickered, and the room went dark for a split second, plunging everything into a cold, disorienting silence. When the lights came back on, the technician and nurse were visibly shaken, their eyes darting nervously around the room. Ethan's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. Something was happening that no one was prepared for. And then, as if to prove just how fragile everything had become, a crucial piece of evidence vanished. The blood sample, Ethan's blood, was gone. The bag, which had been sitting on the table moments ago, was no longer there. "Where is it?" Ethan demanded, his heart racing. The technician looked at him, his face as pale as a ghost. It was just here. It was right here." His voice was almost a whisper, a ghost of its former confident tone. But the blood was gone, vanished. Ethan felt his legs go weak, as though the floor beneath him had suddenly disappeared. His mind was reeling. He had seen it, the blood, the impossible blood that didn't belong to anyone else. And now it was gone, vanished without a trace. "Did someone take it?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking with frustration. Liam stepped forward, his eyes wide with fear. "This is exactly what I was trying to warn you about, Ethan. You have no idea how dangerous this is." The technician's eyes flicked nervously around the room again, but he didn't say a word. It was clear now that this wasn't just about one teenager's blood. There was something much darker going on, something that had been hidden for years, buried so deep that even Ethan hadn't realized the role he was playing in it all. As Ethan struggled to process what was happening, a new thought struck him. Was Liam involved in all of this? Had he known something about the blood, about what was happening behind the scenes? Or was there something far bigger going on, something that reached far beyond his small town, far beyond what anyone could have imagined? The questions spiraled in his mind, each one darker and more unsettling than the last. And just when he thought things couldn't get worse, a voice crackled over the intercom in the lab. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there, someone Ethan didn't recognize. "Ethan," the voice said, calm but laced with a chilling undercurrent. "You've been digging in the wrong places.
Stop now,
or things will get much worse for you." The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, a cold shiver running down his spine. His hands were shaking.
Who was that?
And what did they mean by "things will get much worse"? The deeper Ethan dug, the more he realized he was not just dealing with a medical anomaly. He was caught in the middle of something far more dangerous, and whoever was behind this was watching his every move. And just as the door to the lab swung open again, revealing a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, Ethan felt the full weight of the mystery crash down on him. Everything was about to change, and the answers he had been so desperate to find might just be more than he could handle. As Ethan stood frozen in the lab, the chilling voice from the intercom still echoing in his mind, the shadowy figure in the doorway stepped forward. It wasn't just anyone. This person, dressed in dark clothing and moving with an unnervingly calm demeanor, had an aura of authority that sent a new wave of anxiety rushing through Ethan's veins. The man's face was partially obscured by the dim lighting, but his eyes were cold, calculating, and far too familiar. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as the man took another step forward, his gaze locking onto Ethan's. "I see you're still digging, Ethan," the man said, his voice smooth, almost too smooth. "You should have listened to Liam. This is bigger than you think." Before Ethan could reply, his phone buzzed in his pocket, vibrating against his skin like a warning. His hand instinctively reached for it, and the screen lit up with a single, cryptic message. "You're not the only one." The message was from an unknown number, but Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the name attached to it. Maya, his childhood friend, the one person who had always seemed to be by his side, no matter what. A cold dread washed over him as he stared at the message. What could Maya have to do with this? Why was she suddenly involved in a situation he had thought was only about him? He tried to call her immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. Frustration boiled up inside him as the weight of the mystery grew even heavier. His fingers trembled as he typed a quick reply. "What do you mean? What's going on?" The shadowy figure, still standing at the doorway, watched him closely but said nothing. Ethan felt the pressure building around him as he turned his attention back to his phone, waiting for a response, desperate for any hint of what was happening, why this was happening. The technician and nurse, both now looking increasingly uncomfortable, exchanged nervous glances, but didn't speak up. Then, just as Ethan was about to send another message, a new notification popped up on his screen. This time, it was an image. The blurry picture sent an icy chill straight to his core. It was a photo of Maya, but not just any photo. It was one taken from a distance, perhaps through a window. Maya was standing outside a building, her body language tense, as though she were waiting for something or someone. But what truly made Ethan's heart stop was the figure standing next to her. It was Liam. What was going on? Why was Liam with Maya? Ethan had always known that Liam had some kind of connection to this strange situation, but he had never suspected that Maya, his childhood friend, could be involved too. The pieces of the puzzle seemed to be multiplying, but they were all so disconnected that the full picture was beyond his reach. The stakes were higher now. This wasn't just about Ethan anymore. There were others involved, others who had their own hidden motives, and Ethan had no idea who he could trust. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Was Liam working with someone else to manipulate Maya? Or was Maya in some way complicit in whatever was going on? Had she been keeping secrets from him this whole time? Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by the sharp ring of his phone, and for a moment, his heart lurched in his chest. It was Maya. He answered it quickly, holding the phone to his ear as his pulse quickened. "Ethan." Maya's voice came through, breathless, almost frantic. "You need to stop looking into this.
Right now."
It's dangerous. And there was a sudden, muffled sound in the background, like a door slamming shut. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper, the urgency clear in her tone. "I don't have much time. I'm not the only one. They know about you, Ethan. They know what you've been doing." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, and he leaned against the wall, struggling to process her words. "Maya, what's going on? What do you mean, they know about me?"
Who is they?
There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a silence thick with tension, before Maya finally spoke again. "The blood, it's not just about you. It's about your entire family. And you need to stop asking questions now before." Before she could finish her sentence, the line went dead. Ethan stared at the screen, his stomach twisting in knots. He tried calling her back immediately, but there was no answer. It was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. This was getting worse by the minute. Now, not only was his own blood linked to something that was being kept from him, but it seemed like Maya, too, was wrapped up in it. His family? What did they have to do with any of this? Why was everyone so afraid of the truth? The man in the doorway, who had been silently observing Ethan's frantic reaction, finally stepped forward. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice low and unsettling. "There are things connected to your past, Ethan. Things that have been hidden from you.
It's not just about blood.
It's about what you are, what your family was." Ethan's eyes widened as the weight of those words sank in. What did that even mean? What was he supposed to be? What was his family involved in that had been kept secret for so long? Before Ethan could respond, the man continued. "You want the answers, don't you? Well, you're not going to like what you find. You're already too deep. The threat hung in the air like smoke, and Ethan felt his heart rate quicken. It was as if the entire world was closing in around him. He had no choice now but to keep digging. But what if doing so meant putting everyone he loved in danger? What if uncovering the truth meant uncovering something far darker than he could ever imagine? In that moment, Ethan made a decision. He couldn't back down. No matter what it took, no matter what happened next, he would find the truth. But the path forward was getting more twisted with every passing second, and he couldn't help but wonder, who could he really trust now? And as if to answer that question, his phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Maya. It was a message from Liam. The words that flashed across the screen chilled Ethan to the bone. Don't trust anyone. Not even me. The room seemed to spin as a new layer of uncertainty took hold. Just when Ethan thought he had a grip on the situation, it slipped further out of his reach. The air outside the lab was thick with tension as Ethan stepped into the dimly lit parking garage, the cold bite of night air nipping at his skin. His phone had fallen silent after that last chilling message from Liam, and the weight of uncertainty hung over him like a thick, suffocating fog. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound seemed louder than it should be, and the further he walked into the parking garage, the more he felt like he was being watched. His skin crawled with the sensation that someone or something was right behind him, just out of sight. His steps quickened as his heart thudded harder in his chest, each beat louder, more erratic than the last. As Ethan reached his car, a sudden, sharp noise from behind him made him whirl around, his breath catching in his throat. But there was nothing there. Just the silence of the garage, the stillness of the concrete walls pressing in on him. Shaking his head, he muttered to himself, trying to shake off the paranoia gnawing at the edges of his mind. Get a grip, Ethan. You're being paranoid. No one's following you. It's just your imagination. But even as he tried to convince himself, the hairs on the back of his neck remained stiff, and the feeling of being watched didn't dissipate. He slid into the driver's seat, locking the doors behind him before he even fully settled in. The engine roared to life with a familiar hum, but the sound felt foreign wrong. His phone buzzed again, a notification flashing across the screen. Meet me at the old warehouse. 11 p.m. Don't tell anyone. It was from Maya. The message hit him like a punch to the gut. The last time he spoke to her, she had sounded frantic, warning him to stop digging, and now this? After everything that had happened, Liam's cryptic warning, the mysterious messages, the photograph, Ethan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the walls were closing in around him. Maya was involved in this.
But why?
What did she know that he didn't? What could possibly be so urgent that she had to meet him in a place like that? The warehouse was miles from town, isolated, a place long forgotten by everyone except for the few who had no choice but to go there. He couldn't ignore it. He had to find out what Maya was tangled up in, what Liam had meant by his warning, and why everything suddenly felt so wrong. But as Ethan pulled out of the parking garage and into the street, the gnawing feeling in the pit of his stomach only deepened. He wasn't alone. For the last few minutes, he had been aware of a car behind him. The headlights were too bright, too close. The same car had been there when he left the lab, and now, as he weaved through traffic, it was still there, tailing him. At first, he thought it might be a coincidence. After all, it was late at night, and there were other cars on the road. But as the minutes passed, the unease grew. This car wasn't just following him, it was mimicking his movements, turning when he turned, slowing when he slowed. It was impossible to deny now. Someone was following him. The fear that had once been a creeping sensation at the back of his mind was now a tangible presence, suffocating him in the small space of his car. His fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles ached, and the weight of it all, Maya's message, Liam's warning, the unknown figure in the lab, the threats, pressed down on him. Ethan's thoughts were racing, trying to piece together everything that had happened so far, but nothing fit. Why was someone following him now? Was this all connected to his blood? To his family? What was the significance of the blood drive? And why was Maya, his best friend, the person who had always been there for him, suddenly so tangled up in this mess? The car behind him remained persistent, and as the miles passed, the fear that had once been lurking at the edges of his mind began to flood his thoughts. He needed to get to Maya. He needed answers. But first, he needed to lose the car tailing him. In an impulsive decision, he turned off the main road, taking a series of winding streets that led him into a darker part of town. He glanced in his rearview mirror, watching as the headlights of the car behind him seemed to grow even brighter, still refusing to break off. Every twist and turn he made, the car mimicked, staying dangerously close. The dread in Ethan's chest bloomed into full-blown panic. He was being hunted, he realized. This was no longer just a series of strange occurrences. It was an all-out game of cat and mouse, and the stakes were higher than ever. Suddenly, without warning, the car behind him honked loudly, and then, without hesitation, swerved sharply to the side, cutting off the road and blocking his path. Ethan's heart leapt into his throat as the car came to a screeching halt, the tires skidding across the asphalt. Without thinking, he slammed on the brakes, narrowly avoiding a collision. His pulse was racing as he stared through the windshield, his mind scrambling to make sense of the sudden turn of events. The car's engine roared to life again, but this time, it wasn't behind him. It was now directly in front of him, the driver's side door opening slowly, ominously. Ethan's breath caught in his throat, every instinct screaming at him to run, to get out of there. His hands trembled as he reached for the door handle, but before he could move, a figure stepped out from behind the car, a shadowy silhouette against the dim streetlights. It wasn't just anyone. It was Liam. Ethan's blood ran cold as Liam took a slow, deliberate step toward the car. His expression was unreadable, and his eyes, those eyes that had once been filled with trust, were now cold, calculating. A part of Ethan wanted to call out to him, to demand answers, but the other part of him, this growing, gut-wrenching sense of danger, told him to stay quiet, to keep his distance. Liam stopped a few feet from the car, just close enough for Ethan to hear his voice. "You really thought you could get away from this, didn't you?" Liam's words were low, like a venomous whisper, laced with a threat that made Ethan's skin crawl. Ethan felt trapped. He had no idea how deep this went, how far Liam was involved, or why things had escalated to this point. But it was clear now, they were after him. And Maya, wherever she was somehow caught up in this too. The urgency hit Ethan with a force he couldn't ignore. His world was spiraling out of control, and every second felt like it could be his last. This wasn't just a strange situation anymore, it was a battle for survival. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, Ethan slammed his foot on the gas, narrowly missing Liam and his car as he sped down the street, the roar of the engine drowning out the pounding of his heart. The chase had just begun, and Ethan was running out of time. But the deeper he dug, the more dangerous the truth seemed to be. Ethan's mind raced as he floored the accelerator, the engine growling in protest as he swerved around tight corners, trying to distance himself from Liam and the chaos that had suddenly erupted. But as the adrenaline coursed through him, a nagging thought wormed its way into his brain, a thought that he couldn't quite shake. What if everything he had believed so far was wrong? What if this wasn't just a random set of bizarre coincidences? The more Ethan thought about it, the more he began to feel like he had been blind to something huge, something right in front of him. Maybe the truth wasn't what he thought at all. He'd trusted Liam. He had always trusted him, his best friend, the guy who had been by his side through thick and thin. But now, it seemed impossible to ignore the growing suspicion gnawing at him. Why had Liam turned up in that parking lot? Why had he been the one to block his path? And more importantly, why had Ethan been so naive to think that Liam wasn't involved in all of this? His gut churned with the realization that everything was falling apart, and the pieces of the puzzle he had carefully placed together were suddenly scattering in every direction. But as he continued to race through the dark streets, Ethan's thoughts were shattered by a sudden notification on his phone. It was a message from Maya, and it wasn't just any message, it was a video. His pulse quickened as he opened it, his hands trembling. The screen flickered, and for a moment, Ethan wondered if the video had corrupted. But then, it came into focus, Maya, standing in a brightly lit room, but something was terribly wrong. Her face was gaunt, her eyes wide and frantic, and there was a deep, almost painful tension in her voice as she spoke. "Ethan, I need you to listen to me very carefully," she began, her voice cracking. "You've been following the wrong trail. Everything that's happening to you, it's not what you think. I can't explain it all right now, but I need you to stop looking for answers. This is bigger than anything you could imagine. If you keep going, you'll put both of us in danger." Her words sent a chill down his spine, and just as he was about to respond, the video cut out. Ethan blinked at the screen, his mind reeling. What did she mean? She had always been there for him, had always supported him, but now she was telling him to back off. Was she trying to protect him? Or was she hiding something from him? The room felt suddenly colder, the weight of his confusion settling over him like a storm cloud. 1,000 questions swirled in his head, each one more urgent than the last. The video had only raised more mysteries than it solved. But there was one thing Ethan was certain of now. He couldn't trust anyone. Not Liam. Not Maya. No one. Whoever was behind this was playing a game, and Ethan had become the pawn. But as much as the thought of betrayal gnawed at him, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was more at play here than just deception. His phone buzzed again, pulling him out of his spiraling thoughts. This time, it wasn't Maya or Liam. The message came from an unknown number, a string of numbers and letters that meant nothing to him at first glance. But as he opened the message, a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. It read, "I know you're scared, but you can't stop. You're not the only one. Meet me at the warehouse. I have the answers." The warehouse. Again. Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. Was this some kind of joke? Was someone playing him? But as he stared at the message, a new realization hit him, like a ton of bricks. The number wasn't just some random text, it was linked to a name he recognized. It was his father's phone number. The world seemed to tilt beneath his feet as Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His father had been out of the picture for years, an estranged figure in his life, someone who had disappeared into the shadows long before Ethan could understand the complexities of their fractured family. Ethan hadn't heard from him in ages, not since his mother had passed away. So why now? Was his father suddenly reaching out, connected to a mystery that had consumed Ethan's every thought? The more he thought about it, the more the realization settled in like a weight on his chest. His father had to know something. He had to be involved in all of this. All the pieces of the puzzle that had once seemed separate were starting to align, but in a way that made no sense at all. Ethan had been so focused on Liam, on Maya, on the strange events surrounding the blood drive, that he had never even considered that the person who had the most knowledge, the person who might hold the key to it all, had been right under his nose all along. As the truth began to sink in, Ethan's panic grew. Why hadn't he figured this out sooner? He needed to get to the warehouse, he needed answers. But something about this whole situation felt so off, so wrong, that Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. A trap set by someone he thought he knew, someone he had trusted with his life. Every step he took now felt more like a step into the unknown. Was he being manipulated by the very people he cared about? Or was this something deeper, something far more sinister than he could ever have imagined? The more he uncovered, the less certain he became. The lines between friend and foe were blurring, and with every new piece of information, every new twist, the stakes grew higher, the danger more real. Whoever was behind all of this had planned it all, and Ethan was just the pawn in their game. And as he drove toward the warehouse, that nagging feeling of being watched returned with a vengeance. This time, it wasn't just a paranoia. It was a certainty. He wasn't alone. He was being followed once again. But this time, it wasn't Liam's car. It wasn't a random stranger. This time, it was someone who knew exactly what he was doing, someone who was far closer than Ethan had ever realized. The world was closing in on him, and the truth was more twisted, more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. Ethan's hands tightened around the steering wheel as the warehouse loomed ahead, its silhouette like a shadow from a nightmare. The streetlights flickered as he approached, casting a dim, uncertain glow over the crumbling structure. His heart hammered in his chest. each beat a loud reminder of the impossible choices he now had to face. The message from his father, the cryptic warning from Maya, and the growing sense of dread that someone was always watching, it was all becoming too much to ignore. But this was it. This was where it all converged. The place where the truth was waiting, but so was the danger. He couldn't run anymore, and he couldn't ignore the burning question that had haunted him for days. What did his father really know? As he parked the car in the shadows, Ethan's mind spun. What if his father had been involved in something darker than he could have imagined? What if he was a part of the web of deception that had entangled Ethan's life? The thought made him sick to his stomach. He had never wanted to believe it. Never wanted to entertain the possibility that the man who had once been his hero, the man who had walked out of his life years ago, was tied to this chaos. But the more Ethan thought about it, the more it made sense. No one else had the resources, the access, or the power to pull this off. Ethan had to confront him. He had no choice. Stepping out of the car, he felt a chill crawl down his spine, the weight of the night air pressing against him. The warehouse was silent, the only sound the distant hum of traffic on the highway. It was almost too quiet, and that only made Ethan more anxious. He approached the door, the metal groaning as he pushed it open, revealing the dark interior. The smell of dust and old machinery hung in the air, and there, in the center of the room, stood a figure, his father. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Ethan's mind raced, torn between the anger he felt for his father's abandonment and the overwhelming urge to demand the truth. His father didn't move at first, but the silence stretched between them like a physical barrier, one that Ethan couldn't quite break through. Then, slowly, his father turned, his face shadowed in the dim light. The man looked older, his features lined with years of regret, but there was something in his eyes that didn't belong, something cold, calculating. "Ethan." His father's voice was low, almost a whisper, as though he was reluctant to speak. "I didn't want you involved in this. I didn't want you to find out." Ethan's chest tightened. The words felt like a punch, and he struggled to hold his ground. "Find out what, Dad?" His voice cracked with the weight of everything he had uncovered. "What have you been hiding from me? From us? From Mom? How deep does this go?" His father stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Ethan's. "It's not what you think. I never wanted this life for you. But there are things you're not ready to understand. This mess? It's bigger than both of us." His father's gaze darkened. "You don't know what they're capable of. You're not safe. You've never been safe." Ethan's stomach twisted, but the anger boiling in his veins pushed him forward. "So what? You think I'm supposed to walk away from this? Let it all just disappear? You've been lying to me, hiding the truth, and you expect me to just forget about it." There was a flicker of regret in his father's eyes, but it was quickly replaced by something darker, something that made Ethan's blood run cold. "You don't understand. I don't have a choice anymore. No one does. You're not the only one they've been watching." The words hit Ethan like a freight train. He hadn't wanted to believe it, but now it seemed like the world he knew was crumbling before his eyes. His father had been a pawn in this twisted game all along, just like him. "Who are they?" Ethan demanded, his voice rising with the frustration and confusion he could no longer contain. "Who the hell are you protecting? What do you know that you're not telling me?" But his father just shook his head, the weariness in his eyes apparent. "You need to go. You need to walk away from all of this. Before it's too late." Ethan's mind reeled. How could he walk away now? How could he let his father go back into the shadows while everything around him fell apart? But as he opened his mouth to argue, his phone buzzed. One last message. His heart skipped a beat as he read the notification, the words sending a cold wave of fear through him. "Leave now. We know where you are. If you don't stop digging, we'll make sure you regret it. This is your final warning." Ethan looked up from the screen, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He was standing at a crossroads. One path led to his father, to answers, but the other, darker path seemed to promise only more danger. The threat was real, and the people behind it had shown they weren't afraid to act. It was clear now, Ethan had no guarantee of safety, no matter what he chose. His father's eyes softened as he saw the conflict playing out across Ethan's face. "Ethan, listen to me," he said, his voice more desperate now. "I didn't want this life for you. You're too young to get caught in this web. But if you keep going, if you don't turn back, there's no telling what they'll do to you. You're just a pawn in their game, and they'll tear you apart without a second thought." Ethan's chest tightened as the weight of his father's words hit him like a punch to the gut. He was a pawn. But he couldn't stop now. The truth had already started to slip through his fingers, and he was too far in to turn back. But what if his father was right? What if continuing this meant putting everyone he loved in more danger? What if the only way to find answers was to let go of everything and walk away? The silence between them thickened, and for the first time, Ethan felt the crushing weight of the impossible choice he had to make. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, and no matter which way he jumped, there was no guarantee that he would survive the fall. Ethan didn't have time to process the words his father had just spoken. The reality was beginning to settle in, a cold, harsh truth creeping over him like a thick fog. His phone buzzed again, another message. His hands shook as he read it, his pulse quickening with each passing second. "You're not the only one they're watching." It was a warning, no, a threat, one that confirmed his father's words. The danger was real. But now, the more he thought about it, the more he realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. This wasn't just about him or his father. This wasn't just a small, isolated conspiracy. This was something far bigger, something that could unravel everything he thought he knew about his life. Ethan turned to face his father, but before he could speak, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the warehouse, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. His heart leapt into his throat as the figure of a man emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by a hood. Ethan's stomach twisted. He recognized him. It was Mason. Mason, his so-called ally and friend from school. The one who had helped him piece together the clues from the start. The one who had claimed to want to help him find the truth. But now, as Mason's face came into full view, Ethan saw the coldness in his eyes. The same eyes that had once been warm with friendship were now calculating, filled with something darker, something dangerous. "You didn't listen, did you?" Mason's voice was calm, almost too calm, as he stepped forward, his hands in his pockets. "I warned you to stop digging, Ethan. But you just couldn't help yourself, could you?" Ethan's breath caught in his chest. "What are you talking about?" "Mason, what the hell are you doing here?" His voice trembled with a mix of confusion and rage, disbelief clouding his thoughts. "You've been working with them, haven't you? All along." Mason didn't answer right away. Instead, he took another step forward, his eyes locking onto Ethan's with an unsettling intensity. "You were never supposed to find out," he finally said, his tone almost regretful. "This wasn't part of the plan. But you're too far in now, and I can't let you ruin everything. I thought I could help you, but you just had to keep pushing." Ethan's mind reeled. His so-called friend, the person he had trusted, the one who had seemed to care about finding the truth, had been playing him the whole time. "You lied to me, Mason," Ethan whispered, the betrayal hitting him harder than anything else he'd encountered.
"Why?
Why would you do this?" Mason's lips curled into a cruel smile, and he took another step closer, until they were standing face to face. "Because I'm not just your friend, Ethan. I'm a part of something much bigger. A lot bigger. And you, well, you've always been just a pawn in this game." Before Ethan could process the magnitude of Mason's words, the warehouse doors slammed shut, trapping them inside. The air grew thick, the room feeling smaller by the second as the reality of the situation crashed down on him. This wasn't just about Ethan's quest for answers anymore. It was about something much more sinister, something that involved far more than a few shady individuals. The people behind this had their fingers in every pie: law enforcement, powerful business tycoons, even government officials. The conspiracy was so vast, so far-reaching, that Ethan could hardly comprehend it. His father's warning echoed in his ears. "You're just a pawn in their game." Ethan's blood ran cold. The weight of his father's words had never felt more true than now. He wasn't just uncovering a local scandal or a small-time conspiracy. He was stumbling onto something that could destroy everything. His family. His friends. His entire life. Mason stepped back, shaking his head slowly, almost pityingly. You should have listened, but now you're in it. You're too deep, and you don't even realize it. This isn't just about blood drives and small-time deals anymore. It's about controlling people, manipulating them, and there's no one left to stop it. Ethan's mind spun, trying to make sense of everything. Mason wasn't just a spy for some underground network.
No.
He was a key player, someone with knowledge that could shatter everything Ethan had ever believed about his life.
The blood drive.
The lab tech, his father, Maya. They had all been pieces on a board, pawns in a game he couldn't even begin to understand. You're just a small part of the bigger picture, Mason continued, his voice now tinged with menace. You think you're the hero in this story? Think again. You're nothing but collateral damage, just like everyone else who tries to expose the truth. Ethan's fists clenched at his sides. His father had been right. No one could be trusted. No one was who they seemed to be. And now, with Mason's betrayal, Ethan realized just how close he was to the edge. His entire world was crumbling, and there was no one left to turn to. But before he could react, a muffled sound echoed through the warehouse, followed by a low, menacing chuckle. Someone else was here. Someone far worse. Mason froze, his face blanching, as he turned toward the source of the noise. Ethan's heart raced as the shadows seemed to come alive, and he just knew, that things were about to spiral out of control. Everything Ethan had uncovered, everything he thought he knew, was now a lie. The pieces of the puzzle had shifted, and the truth was slipping further and further away. The stakes were higher than ever, and Ethan had no idea who would make it out of this alive. The silence in the warehouse was deafening, the air thick with tension as Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. His breath came in shallow gasps, a nervous energy rippling through him. Mason's betrayal was a weight too heavy to bear, but the feeling of being hunted was worse. The shadows in the far corner shifted again, and Ethan's eyes locked onto them, his instinct screaming at him to run, but his feet remained frozen to the floor. His father's voice echoed in his mind. You're not just a pawn, Ethan. You're the key. The figure stepped forward from the darkness, and Ethan's heart nearly stopped when he saw who it was. It wasn't Mason. It was someone far more dangerous. Someone he hadn't seen in years. Someone who had been hidden in plain sight the entire time. His own mother. But she wasn't the person he remembered. Her once warm, loving eyes had been replaced with a cold, calculating gaze, and her smile held no warmth, only something darker, something far more sinister. Surprised to see me, Ethan? She asked, her voice like ice, her tone void of any maternal affection. She stepped into the dim light, revealing a gun tucked into the waistband of her pants. You've been a very curious boy, digging around where you shouldn't. It's time you understood just how deep this goes. Ethan stumbled back, his mind racing as the shock of seeing her hit him like a freight train.
Mom, what are you doing here?
What is all this? Why didn't you tell me? Why are you doing this to me? His mother let out a soft laugh, the sound chilling him to his core.
Oh, Ethan.
You've always been so eager to understand things you're not ready for. The truth is far more complex than you can imagine. You were never meant to know this, but now that you're here, you might as well learn it all. We never intended for you to get so close, but I suppose your curiosity has its uses. She gestured around the room. All of this, the blood drive, the research, the experiments, it's part of a larger plan. A plan that spans decades. And you, Ethan, are at the center of it. His stomach twisted as he tried to process her words. His mind couldn't connect the dots. This wasn't just about a corrupt lab or a small-time conspiracy. It was something much bigger. His mother wasn't just a mother. She was part of something that went beyond anything he'd imagined. Something dangerous. You're part of this? He asked, his voice cracking. What is this? What are you involved in? She smiled, a cold, emotionless smile. What's the point of keeping secrets if you're too stubborn to see the truth? She stepped closer, her hand resting on the gun. We've been working on a project, a way to control the future, to alter lives on a scale you can't even begin to understand. The blood drives? Just the start. The real work begins now. Ethan's mind was spinning. None of this made sense. His mother, the woman who had raised him, loved him, had been hiding her true identity this whole time. "No," he whispered. "You're lying. This can't be real." "Oh, but it is," she said, her voice growing colder. "And you were always part of the plan, whether you realized it or not. That's why they kept watching you. They knew you were the key to everything. Your blood, your genetic makeup, it was all designed to fit into their vision. But you were never meant to figure it out." Everything clicked into place, but the truth felt too monstrous to grasp. Ethan felt like he was suffocating under the weight of it all. His blood had been the catalyst, the very thing that had been used for the project all along. The tests, the blood drives, his mysterious donation, all of it had been carefully orchestrated. His life had never truly been his own. He had been a pawn in a game that spanned his entire existence. His mother's eyes glinted with a coldness that pierced his soul. "You're scared now, aren't you?"
You should be.
"Because the worst part of all this is that you can't stop it. There's no going back." The realization hit Ethan like a tidal wave. His life had been a lie, and now there was nothing left to hold on to. His mother, the person he trusted most, had been working against him, using him as a mere tool for something far more sinister. And Mason had been a part of this too. It was all connected, all part of the plan that had been set in motion before he'd even been born. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why me? Why my blood?" His mother took a step closer, and for a moment, there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that could have been regret, but it was gone too quickly. "Because you were always meant for something bigger, something better, something powerful. You don't understand it yet, but you will." But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. The shock had worn off, and now the only thing left was pure, raw determination. He couldn't just let it end like this. He couldn't let her win. "I'll stop you," he spat, his voice thick with defiance. "I won't let you get away with this." His mother's smile widened as she raised the gun, but before she could fire, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse. The doors burst open, and in the doorway stood Maya, holding a crowbar in one hand and a look of pure fury on her face. "Get away from him," she shouted, charging forward with a speed Ethan hadn't expected. Ethan barely had time to react as the gunfire echoed through the room, but Maya was faster. She slammed the crowbar into his mother's hand, knocking the gun to the floor. For a moment, everything stood still, and then chaos erupted. His mother's face twisted with rage as she lunged for the gun, but Maya was already there, her fists flying, her movements sharp and controlled. Ethan couldn't believe what he was seeing. Maya, the quiet girl who had been so lost in her own world, had just saved his life. In the chaos, Ethan's mind was racing. He had to make a choice. He could stay and fight, or he could escape. He could keep going, digging deeper, trying to uncover the truth, or he could run, disappear before the full weight of what was happening consumed him. But before he could make his decision, his phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from Mason. "It's too late. You've already lost." The words sent a chill down his spine. There was no escaping now. Whatever this conspiracy was, it was more powerful than anything he could handle. And with his mother's face still twisted in rage, Ethan realized that the real battle wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. The days that followed felt like walking through the aftermath of a wildfire, charred, quiet, and forever changed. Ethan stood on the edge of the lake where it had all started, the same lake where he had first donated blood, thinking he was doing something good. The wind whispered through the trees, a hollow, lonely sound that reminded him how much had been lost. The warehouse was gone now, burned to the ground, erased like a stain no one wanted to admit existed. His mother had vanished in the chaos, slipping away into the smoke with no trace left behind, and the government sweep that followed offered more questions than answers. Officials called it a rogue biotech ring. The media labeled it a cult-like organization exploiting genetic research. But Ethan knew better. He knew the truth ran deeper than any headline, more twisted than any press release would dare to say. In the weeks after the explosion, Maya remained by his side, quiet but present. Her bruises had faded, but the look in her eyes hadn't. They were both different now, two people who had seen too much and couldn't go back to the way things were. Mason was arrested, though strangely, he refused to speak a word during questioning. Then, just as mysteriously, he was found dead in his cell, a supposed suicide, though the bruises on his neck didn't quite match. The message he sent Ethan still sat on his phone like a ghost. "It's too late. You've already lost." Ethan stared at it more than he cared to admit, wondering if it had been a warning or a curse. Maybe both. The files Ethan had uncovered were seized by authorities, but not before he made copies. Copies he hid in places no one would think to look. Deep down, he knew the project wasn't finished. The conspiracy hadn't died with that fire. It had only gone underground, where things like this tend to grow stronger. The truth about his blood, his DNA, the experiments, he still didn't fully understand it, but he knew he wasn't the only one. The project had participants all across the country, maybe even beyond. Some unknowingly donated blood at local drives, some were handpicked like him. And there was one chilling reality that refused to leave his mind. There might be others like him out there. Others who hadn't yet realized they were being used. Maya tried to move on, talking occasionally about leaving town, starting over somewhere quiet, somewhere they could both forget. But Ethan couldn't forget. He was no longer afraid, but he wasn't free either. Every time he saw a flyer for a blood drive, he looked twice. Every time a new health startup launched, he searched the names behind it. Paranoia had become second nature, but so had vigilance. What haunted him most was the final clue hidden in the last file he decrypted, a photograph from decades ago, black and white, grainy. It showed a child, his mother as a little girl, standing beside a lab technician whose face had been scratched out in red ink. Written on the back, in the same slanted handwriting from all the messages, Phase 1 was just the beginning. Ethan folded the photo and placed it back into the envelope, sealing it tight. He didn't know what Phase 2 was, or when it would come. But he knew this wasn't over. He knew that what started with him might end with someone else, and maybe that's what terrified him most. He looked out at the lake again, its surface still, peaceful, almost too perfect. Beneath the calm, he imagined the current running strong and cold and silent, just like the truth. Always there, just below the surface. And in that stillness, with the sun dipping low and casting long shadows behind him, Ethan made a quiet vow, not for revenge, not even for justice, but for something simpler. For truth. Because now he understood what it really meant to be part of something larger than himself. It wasn't about saving the world. It was about making sure people knew what really happened. That sometimes the darkest secrets hide in the most familiar places. That not everything labeled helpful is harmless. And that sometimes the ones you trust the most are the ones who bury the truth the deepest. As he walked away from the lake, he didn't feel like the same person who had arrived here months ago. The story had changed him, broken him in some places, but forged something stronger in others. He didn't know what came next, but somewhere, behind the static of the everyday, he knew the next chapter was already being written. And this time he'd be ready.